A lot of my lens as a dancer has been informed by my small stature. I am 4'11". That was kind of like the verbal focus, or like the most present spoken thing that I just heard from people. Oh my gosh, you're so little. Oh my God, you're so cute. You're so short. Like, wow. And my parents, I love them so much, but in their brokenness, a lot of the way that they related to me was in condescension. And so I received that in my brokenness, unable to filter, right? I received that and kind of like shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And my natural bent as well is towards paralyzing perfectionism. People who've seen me dance in the last 10 years, who know me to be one who eats up space, would not recognize the dancer that I grew up as. Because like a simple tombe pas de bourrée across the floor that should have this kind of sweeping, kind of authoritative kind of entrance into the space, claiming the space, I was so scared of making a mistake that I literally was like tangled in these knots. And everything had to be perfect. And because it wasn't, the self-hatred, kind of like beating down, self-degradation was constant. I cannot articulate it enough how constant and how toxic it was. I don't claim it to be something I initiated. I do believe there was some spiritual warfare there. I believe there were some negative voices in my training, not at Baton Rouge Ballet Theater, but prior to that. And it kind of got in this kind of cyclical place. And I agreed with my height. Like my height was me. I couldn't take up space. I couldn't dance larger than life because my skin and bones told me that I could go this far. That was it. Those were the limitations. I saw the limitations as actual limitations. It got to the point where an across the floor combination would maybe take me like a foot. And I would have teachers, seeing potential, trying to pull these things out of me. But all I could hear was their disapproval and their dissatisfaction. And so the beating down got more intense. And it wasn't until like that walking away from the Lord and then this radical experience of coming back to the Lord. I love that verse and I can never find it, but it talks about how the angels look at humanity and marvel. And I heard someone speak on that once and I was like, the angels are in the presence of God constantly. Like, why would they be jealous? Not jealous, but why would they think humanity has something of value that they don't have? And the speaker said, well, they don't know the beauty of being separated and romanced back because they have never been apart. And I was like, it was just like, oh my gosh. Because we only know the beauty of the light because we know the darkness. We only know the radiance of joy because we know the depths of grief. There is something in God's design that utilizes these, what we deem negative experiences or emotions or suffering. He uses that to show us himself because we would not fully understand the magnitude of his majesty without understanding the lowliness of the things of this life. And so I don't know where I was going with that, but I remember, kind of my movement discoveries of kind of experiencing God in my body happening when I was romanced back. And so as I was romanced back, having been apart for the first time in my life and then experiencing this coming together, I feel like in his grace, he kind of like another layer was just removed. Another layer of the veil was removed to be able to see this very rudimentary truth that we are not just flesh and bone. And so I began to see these distal ends or these limbs not as like a period, like it ended right here, but as almost as a conduit as an extension, that there was breath and life flowing way beyond what I could physically see. He spoke to me in that class with Ryan. He said something like, that which flows through you is greater than you. Therefore, you can do things that no one expects, including yourself. That which flows through you, that's him. He flows through us. The God of the universe lives in us and flows through us. It's his Ruach breath that sustains us. Literally, if he withdraws it, I'm gone. And so understanding that, I started to see movement experience as this kind of inhale and exhale with the creator. And so the inhale and exhale was no longer the bounds of my physical body, but it was eternity. And so in a way, seeing the trajectories of movement and seeing him just kind of sweeping these brush strokes across the space or breathing songs across the space, it was almost like allowing myself to just see it and let him use me in it whatever way he wanted to. So it took a little bit of the autonomy and like fear of being out of control away. And it almost kind of got me excited about making mistakes. We made that word. Humanity made that word. Mistakes in terms of like what was right or wrong. It really brought a sense of like playground to dancing that I had never experienced before. I also had, I think I've probably mentioned this, Sarah and Tehila, before, but one of Doug's former dancers, Eddie Taketa, he used an image in a class that he taught, and it just changed my everything. He kind of asked the class, like, how tall are you? And again, with my like past wounds and triggers, I was like, like I didn't want to focus on my little height. He came right up to me, stood in my face, and he said, Whitney, how tall are you? And I said, 4'11". And he said, wrong answer. And he started to talk about trees and how a tree, this is not true for every type of tree, but for some trees, they have the same length of root in the ground as they do visibly above the ground. So if I'm looking at a 4-foot tall tree, I can assume that it has roughly 4 additional feet of root under the earth. So from root to the top of the tree, it's actually 8 feet in length. And the floor or the ground is not something that it is disconnected from or fighting with. I started to see the floor as my midline, not my separate kind of, I had to struggle to relate to this. So instead of, as I would push off of one leg to the other, I would literally see 4 feet 11 into the earth energetically that way, almost seeing the expansion not only of just my length that I have access to as a child of the King, but then also seeing his breath and life flow through me outward through all of my limbs. And so it almost it became too big for me to have any more space for perfectionism. Like there was no more space. There was no more space. It was like kicked out. Perfectionism was like kicked out because it was so much more fun to dance looking at Jesus. It was just so much more fun.